Welcome to Civic Hub, the show where we meet the people behind local government and explore how they keep our communities running. In this episode, we head to the heart of North Texas to sit down with Dallas County Clerk John Warren. From safeguarding Dallas County's historical archives to serving one of the fastest growing populations in the country, John shares how his office is modernizing services, tackling big challenges, and finding new ways to stay connected with the community. This week on Civic Hub, I have the pleasure to have the Dallas County Clerk, John Warren, joining me. John, thanks for coming on.
Chris, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. This is a great thing you're doing.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about yourself and the office of the Dallas County Clerk.
Well, I'll say I started my career with Dallas County 1994. My background was courts and technology. I started out in federal court and then went to the Department of Justice and then joined Dallas County in 1994. And it's been an interesting ride, I'll say that, since then. Lots of progress. When I came to Dallas County in 94, it was totally different than what it is now. Kind of similar to when I moved to Dallas in 1985. Just like the city of Dallas is a totally different place. Dallas County as a local government is totally different than what it was. In 94, very little technology was used. It was still more the old school paper environment. And so it's been an interesting transition. I was there 13 years as a court administrator and a systems administrator before I ran for office. I actually ran for office in 2005, Chris. I ran on a platform of creating a paperless office. I said, one day a lawyer will be able to try a case from a laptop computer. No one knew what I was talking about. That was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And we're still evolving to that. We're getting closer to it now than we were then. But that's kind of like when it comes to my office when I inherited in 2007 versus what we're doing now, it's kind of an evolution of both society as well as technology. And how do you merge those two together in order to make public service work?
Yeah, that's a pretty big statement to think in 2005, because if we think back, most people didn't even have a personal computer until maybe 2000, 2002. Mm-hmm. The internet was still a new thing.
Yes.
So to say, to make a stand that you're going to go paperless in 2005, that's a pretty impactful, innovative statement. You said you were kind of a federal area. How did that kind of look from what you do now to what you did when you first started out in government?
It's like I said, even in federal courts, that was a very paper intense. I would just say federal government, state government, local government. It was the traditional thing. It's only been within more recent years, I would say, more of 2007, 2008, that there's been kind of this focus on technology as it relates to local governments. I will tell you an interesting story. The former Chief Justice of Texas Supreme Court, Wallace Jefferson, his vision was kind of similar to mine. Mine was that a lawyer would be able to try a case from a laptop computer. His vision was that lawyers would not file paper with clerks' offices. And so those kind of merged together because in 2010, the Texas Supreme Court did a mandate where attorneys could not file paper with the clerk's office. It had to be done electronically. That's when they created what is now eFile Texas. Well, it's a portal that an attorney would use to file their case. I actually, when it comes to public service, we have to pay attention to what is happening legislatively as well as with the Texas Supreme Court, because they are the ultimate decision makers of how courts function. So I actually, when Chief Justice Jefferson said, no attorney will file paper with a clerk. And I said, well, what does that mean to me? And so we were accustomed to receiving paper from lawyers, creating a paper file. And so for me, and of course it kind of evolved into what my original platform was creating a paperless office. I was actually well on board with that and embrace that. But from a fiscal standpoint, I said, well, what does this mean to me? I'm receiving paper. I will no longer be receiving paper. So what environment will I operate in? Am I now going to print what someone is actually delivering to me, this paper? And so I said, if I did that, that means that my operating costs will go up because now I have to have more supplies in order to print what I'm now getting electronically. Paper, toner, of course, paper continued to create paper files, and I actually did a process on what that would mean, and I actually add the dollar values at certain points to maintain that environment, even though that was not what I wanted to do. And what everyone, when you're in local government, what you should, or in government, or in anything, think about what a process means and how what would it mean if you transformed from that process. I actually saved every year about $600,000 cost savings as it relates to operations because I was no longer using paper, and now it's in a virtual environment. But also, one of the problems that we had in a paper environment was that if we have a paper file, the judge needs to see that case, my staff needs to see that case, or the public may want to access the case. Only one person can see it because it's paper. I mean, you can't share that. But when you create that digital or that electronic environment, anybody can see it. But also, we spent a lot of time, me and my staff did, in hunting down paper. A judge may have it. In some instances, a lawyer would get a hold of it and leave it out on the bench outside of the courtroom. That's not very responsible. And so it also helped control having access to it because there's no longer paper files. So it controlled the access and losing files. That was a term that went away after we went paperless.
Nice. So we've talked a little bit on the court side. What are some of the other services that the county clerk's office provides besides focusing on the courts?
Great question. In addition to courts, and of course the county clerk's office, that's one of the most versatile offices, diverse offices in county government. In addition to courts, I also serve as the clerk of court for the Commissioner's Court. I serve as the local registrar of vital records, and I also serve as the register of deeds for property records. So all of that encompasses the work of the county clerk.
Can you break that down a little bit? You know, your constituents listening, general public listening, they might, we know what a vital record is, but they might not know.
So yeah, thank you. So I'm responsible for, in addition to court records and Commissioner's Court records, birth, marriage, death, as well as property records, but not just property records as in deeds and property ownership. It is also, if you are in a former military, we also maintain a military officers or a veterans DD 214 showing their service. We also, if you're going to start your own business, your assumed name application for business, we maintain those also. I actually refer to my office as, you may not know about my office over the course of but in some point of time in your life, you will deal with the county clerk, whether it's getting a birth certificate, a death certificate, a marriage license, or buying a house.
Yeah. Or if you're going through specific court systems. So do you want to touch a little bit more on the kind of the court structure too, what courts you're involved with that you file for? Because again, different states do different things. What are the county clerk's responsibilities when it comes to the courts within the state of Texas?
So I'm responsible for, I serve as the clerk of court for probate. Those are related to estates and managing someone's estate or affairs. I refer to it as the business side of dying. And then there's our civil courts, which basically handle civil litigation. Dallas County is uniquely positioned where it is the only county in Texas out of 254. Dallas County courts, county civil courts, are the only county courts in the state of Texas that has unlimited jurisdiction, which means in all 253 others, the maximum jurisdiction that someone can file a case in those courts is $250,000. 3 years ago, there was a wrongful death case filed in the county court at law, one of our courts. The jury awarded the family it was $1 billion. So we have unlimited jurisdiction, similar to the district courts. So we have those, and then I have 13 misdemeanor courts. 2 of those serve as courts of appeals from the municipal courts as well as the JP courts. My county courts at law also serve as courts of appeals for JP courts as it relates to evictions that happen in the JP courts. Also uniquely about Dallas County, we're the only county that has truancy courts. The majority of those are handled by the JPs in other counties.
So let's have people understand, too, a little bit more about Dallas County. It is a large urban county. Population
Yes.
currently sits where?
Dallas County's population is about 2.7 million. We are the
Wow.
8th or 9th, I can't remember which one, 8th or 9th largest county in the United States. Second largest in the state of Texas.
Wow. Now, I know you know your peers and colleagues in government very well. What are some of the challenges that a large urban county faces that maybe smaller and medium counties don't face?
I've had that conversation with some of my colleagues. There's nothing different about what we do that smaller counties don't do. It's all the same, but the difference between a large urban county and those smaller jurisdictions is the volume. And managing a large volume, you have to have the resources to do that. And so that takes a lot of manpower or automation in order to accomplish what we are required to, either by statute, the Constitution, or even by a rule of law.
How do you stay on top of what's going on in the legislature, how the statutes are changing? How do you stay abreast of that constant change that in Texas happens maybe every year, maybe every 2 years? Do you have dedicated staff? Do you belong to associations? Are sometimes you just surprised by what happens? I'm sure the answer is yes to all of those.
It's yes to all of those.
But I think, your peers that are listening across the country, sometimes they get caught off guard when there's legislation. You came into office in 2009 as the elected official. 2007. And, what was your learning curve to all of this? Were you aware of it when you came in, or was it just a steep learning curve? You just jumped off the cliff and...
Well, interestingly enough, I got my degree in political science, so I understood the political process. But there's what you refer to as book knowledge, and then there's the firsthand knowledge of a process. Because when it comes to the legislature, and right now we're in the middle of the 89th legislative session in Texas, and I tell you, it has been a lot of work. To go back to the first part of your question, how do you manage that? Well, one, you have to have a dedicated team. I'm also the president of our state association for county and district clerks for Texas. But also, you have a dedicated team in Dallas County that's comprised of elected officials and other department heads, as well as staffers that monitors every piece of legislation that actually goes through. They actually are now using artificial intelligence, kind of look for certain phrases and words as it relates to local government and any bill that may have been filed. In this session, we had over 8,000 bills filed.
Good God.
Those that impact county and district clerks for Texas, there were approximately, I would say, about 60 or so. Of that 60, some were legislation that we initiated. Some were initiated by someone else that we would either support or do our best efforts to convince the member of the legislature that was not a good bill, but that requires explaining to them the negative impact that legislation would cause on local governments. In this particular instance, for clerks, you have your dedicated team for Dallas County that monitors legislation. We have our dedicated team with the County and District Clerks Association of Texas that monitors legislation. And I appointed as president all the members of my legislative committee. There were about 25, 30 members of that committee. We need all hands on deck. And we also have to, it can't just be about large urban counties, medium-sized and small counties. It's kind of an all hands on deck approach. And of course, constant trips to Austin. The legislative session started in January. I was in Austin pretty much every other week or so from February up until a week or so ago.
Are bills now stopped coming out of committee? Has that process stopped?
Yes, there are some laggers. The House actually started late because they had to elect a new speaker. And so they kind of started late. But so as it relates to the Senate side, all of that is done. But there's, a House that's, you may have a bill that starts in the Senate, but if it's voted out of the Senate, then it has to go to the House. If a bill that starts in the House, if it passes the House, then it has to go to the Senate. One of the approaches I did in this particular session was I filed 5 bills in the Senate. I filed a companion bill in the House. So if the Senate passed theirs, then there's no reason to not pass those bills in the House. The same for the House. If they pass those House bills, then they would pass those bills that were brought over from the Senate. And fortunately for us, all of the bills that we've had, they've all passed both the House and Senate. We have one, like I said, that's kind of lagging behind only because the House started late with the election of the Speaker.
Is there any of those bills that you'd want to talk about that you can share?
For me, I wanted my legacy as president of the County and District Clerks Association of Texas. One of my passions is property fraud, and it's kind of
for our viewers. I'm gonna hit pause there. Can you explain what property fraud is?
Thank you very much. And one of the difficulty is assuming that people understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, Chris, I thank you for that. Property fraud is when, mostly in most instances, is property that is owned by someone, but they may not live in the property, or it's property that's owned by someone and they may not necessarily maintain it, and there may just be a vacant lot. In most instances, that's where the majority of the fraud takes place. But what someone will do, they will see a piece of property, and if they don't see a lot of activity, so they will go down to the county clerk's office and they will file generally a quit claim deed, and they will forge the name of the original owner, and then they would take possession of that property through a quit claim deed saying that their property is theirs. Their next step is to go to a bank or a financial institution, take out a loan using that property as collateral, and then so the original owner is left with that debt. And so when it comes to property fraud, stealing someone's property, stealing the ownership of property, there become 2 victims, the person who actually owns the property and the financial institution who made a loan on property. And so when in my office, over the course of the years, I've had a lot of seniors who've come to my office and very distraught and aggravated that they realize that the property that they are living in is not theirs. There was there was a citizen in Dallas County who didn't know that her property was stolen until someone came to start cutting down trees and moving things, and then that's when she discovered that that her property had been stolen. That's kind of something that's been going on for a while in Texas. We actually have we actually work with CoFile and we have a property fraud alert system that people can register. It's free for the public. I absorb the cost for that, just like all county clerks in Texas. We absorb that cost because we care about our constituents and the things that happen to them. But the challenge, I'm kind of drift off, but it's important for people to understand that you don't have to go to, there's a service called Title Lock where you actually register and pay for a subscription when it's a service that's offered free to your county. I would advise anyone, contact your county clerk, contact your register of deeds to see if they provide a property fraud alert system.
Yeah, before they spend money on a service.
Before you spend money on a service, yeah.
So what legislation is upcoming that relates to property fraud?
So this discussion started last September with the House Committee on Business and Industry. I testified there last September. So the legislation that we put in place is making sure that if an individual is committing property fraud, that one, there's now a criminal penalty, because before it wasn't. You would go to court, civil court, and you would just get your property. You would just get the property put back in your name. The interesting thing about property records is that once that document is filed, it cannot be removed. So you have to file another document to actually void that previous document, but that voided document remains there.
Yeah, it's part of the record.
It's part of the record. And so with the legislation, one was to create a criminal penalty, but also we had this thing called a motion for judicial review that we thought was going to solve the problem. But that particular legislation in the government code, 51901 of the Texas government code, it says a fraudulent lien, but if there's a lien on your property, you still own it. There's just another financial attachment. So a lot of judges where they were saying, well, this doesn't qualify. This doesn't meet the test of what the statute is saying. So I actually rewrote 51901 to make it a fraudulent conveyance. And so now that information, that fraudulent conveyance has been adopted into the statute. So now we can still use that motion, not a motion for judicial review on a lien, but a motion for judicial review. It's not actually no longer a motion. You know, my background is courts inside, and so we're like, nope, it can't be a motion. A motion, you don't start a case with a motion. You start a case with a petition. And so it's now a petition for judicial review for a fraudulent conveyance. And that actually helps take the person, give the ownership back to the original owner.
Cast a much wider net.
Yeah, but also, you know, given that there's lots of photo editing software that's very intelligent photo editing software, and then there's artificial intelligence. Criminals are also using that to hijack or use or copy notary information. And so we have another piece of legislation that says it's now illegal to do that. That legislation wasn't, that law wasn't there before.
Yeah, notary fraud is on the rise,
yes,
too.
Notary fraud is on the rise also. And then so there are several different variations of those particular things, those particular activities as it relates to clerks and property fraud. Some of the other things that we're doing is automating processes. One of the bills that I wanted to have that did not make it was for an individual to be able to file an assumed name for business electronically and have an electronic notary, because you can do an electronic notary. But that was something that didn't make it because we were so overwhelmed with the property fraud issue, and that just became the centerpiece, because during the course of this legislative session, it just became more and more rampant with fraud and even some notary participation and the theft of a notary information. One of the things when I testified, one of the many times I've testified, I reminded members of the House and the Senate that a notary is actually an officer of the state. And so you have someone, so it's not just something that requires where a slap on the wrist is sufficient. No, there should be a penalty. So that's how we've gotten to where we are. So those are some of the good things that we've been doing as it relates to protecting the citizens of Dallas County, and that has been my priority this session.
Yeah, it's a good priority because I think at least once a week, somewhere on a national news network, you're hearing more about notary fraud and property fraud, which 10 years ago, you just either it wasn't, I'm sure it was still going on, it just wasn't reported on, but now it's definitely mainstream. We're seeing more and more legislation throughout the United States for it, and it's good that it's potentially could be criminal in Texas.
And what's so crazy about property fraud is that someone had the audacity to file a fraudulent deed on Graceland.
Wow,
how's that? So it's instances like that when I think everybody's just gotten fed up, and I appreciate the collaboration from particularly in Dallas County, my state senator and two of my state representatives say, yes, John, we will champion this for you. How
do you build those? So, again, your peers are listening. They probably have great ideas on how to get legislation passed. Mm-hmm. Most legislation starts at the local level. How do you build those relationships with your local legislators so they will become your champion for these great ideas?
I don't want to continue to say that's a great question, but you're asking a lot of really good questions. I was speaking to the Texas Association of Counties board earlier on in the session. County judges, county commissioners, treasurers, tax assessors, constables, sheriffs. And I said, this is a collaborative thing. It has to be. And I said, our wins are also your wins.
Yeah.
Because we share the same constituents. And so while you're talking about the things that you're talking about, I can also say that we're supporting the sheriff in those initiatives. The sheriff and the county judges and county commissioners says, yes, we're on board with the county clerks and the district clerks who are addressing those issues that negatively impact the citizens of our counties. But when it comes to getting legislation done, you have got to. Part of being an elected official is that you just don't do the work in the office that you hold, because everything that you do has an impact on everyone else. So you have to build those relationships with your state representatives, with your senators. Clerks have to collaborate with commissioners. Commissioners have to collaborate with clerks, county judges, and also as we're all stakeholders in what happens in local government. And so you have to build those relationships and address things together.
What is maybe one example you could give that helped you solidify or build a relationship with a stakeholder?
It's kind of impossible not to. For example, but in this particular instance, people will come to me as it relates to, in this instance, property fraud. But they will also go to their local state representatives and senators and say, what's the state, what are you going to do? You need to do something about this. Okay, so how do you start that? You visit the county clerk, you visit John Warren's office and say, hey, that state senator or that state representative, John, what are some of the things, these were some of the things that my constituents, that are your constituents, are complaining to me about. And I'll say, yes, those are the things that my constituents and your constituents are also complaining to me about. I don't know how you can miss that. I mean, it's important because they're getting the same information, you're getting the same information. But the one thing that you don't want to happen is for a state representative or a state senator to come to you and you're absolutely clueless about an issue that is directly, that is a direct result of a business process that you have. And so you just can't take the seat and just sit there and do nothing. It requires work.
Yeah. Yeah. How do your constituents get their feedback to you? Do you have someplace they can leave? Like, do you have an email? Do you have part of your website where they can drop a note? Do they just come in and see you? You know, what's that kind of feedback mechanism and communication loop where you can hear that information to then collaborate with your local legislators on issues?
You know, a long time ago, I used to tap into the town hall meetings that some of our state representatives and senators would have. But also now we use, of course, I have an open door policy. Anybody can come see me. But also I have a call center that you can call and if you have an issue, but also have an email address. It's CC Clerk Inquiry, I think that's what it is. And so you can email me about any issue. And I actually have staff that actually monitors that and responds, but as well as social media. And so if I see that there's an issue, then we're going to put on social media, hey, citizens of Dallas County, you need to be aware of these things. Or I may just say, these are some of the things that we've experienced and we want you to be aware of. Yeah.
Speaking of social media, how has that changed? Because I'm sure when you came in 2007,
there was
there
no
probably
such thing
yeah.
as
I don't even know. I don't want to think back then.
Social media was coming to my office and meeting me in the lobby.
Yeah. That was a different definition of social media.
Yeah.
How have you adopted it? What do you use it for? Do you have a social media person, department? How does it work? Because again, you're representing millions of constituents, so you've got to think that there's millions of Facebook profiles out there in Dallas County.
Mm-hmm. We actually, I do have a person who's dedicated to doing my social media. That's my connection to the public. And so we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, every social media platform there is. We're on it, and as well as we collaborate with local media, Channel 4, Channel 8,
traditional media.
Traditional media. And sometimes they'll come down and do a story, or they may come down to want to do a story on something that they've heard. So we'll visit. And I've done several interviews as it relates to property fraud and some other things that's transpired in Dallas County, even as it relates to things related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're always willing to make sure that we have the assistance of social media as well as local television to help us get our message out to the citizens of Dallas County.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned COVID, and you made some pretty bold statements early in your career about going paperless. How COVID, I'm assuming, helped push that agenda forward pretty fast.
Indeed.
How did the pandemic accelerate some of your initiatives, and what do you think are some future initiatives that you can continue on?
One of the things that I spent the lion's share of my time doing over the course of the pandemic, of course, if I can go back, so the COVID pandemic is on us, and then so everything is shutting down. There's no one very few people on the streets. There are very few people going in and out of businesses. And so you have...
But yet business still has to function as normal in your office.
And so we had Chief Justice Nathan Hecht, who said, courts have to continue. People have to have access to justice. Courts are essential. And then you have Governor Abbott saying, property transfers, property sales, all those things, issuing birth certificates, certainly death certificates, all those things are essential. Everything that both Chief Justice Hecht and Governor Abbott said were essential, that encompassed everything in my office. And of course, so I was studying all those things. My office was about 50%, 60% automated, but there was still that other percentage that was not. I spent my time studying all those things that we had to figure out how to do, but that were initially done manually, how to figure out how to quickly create some automated platform in order to accomplish those things. Notated all of those things. We did a rudimentary, temporary thing, similar to courts. Courts were now being done by Zoom. We had a lot of courts that had no technology infrastructure. One of the things that we did court calls so that we could continue to get people out of jail, because otherwise our jail population would continue to increase. And so they were doing virtual hearings from the jail so that you can get inmates, or should I say defendants, out of jail. You have a virtual magistration hearing. You have a virtual plea that will get those individuals out of the system. And so that was one of the things. As it relates to the other courts, standing up those, and the Texas Supreme Court actually gave each court a Zoom license, gave them the license, but didn't give them the infrastructure. So we had to quickly furnish those courts with the infrastructure. As it relates to on my, my ability to issue birth, death, and marriage license, as well as property records, we actually set up where an individual can come. We had drop baskets, drop off, where you could drop it off. You put it in the sealed envelope. What my staff was doing virtual, because our doors were locked, but we were going outside of the door, and you had to include a self-addressed stamped envelope where we would mail it. So we created those processes. Unfortunately, when it comes to property records, because of property fraud, as it relates to John and Jane Q. Public, well, the law does not allow for them to file a document electronically. I don't think that's one of those things. It has to maintain in its current state until we eradicate property fraud, because, there's just no trust, because sometimes the good have to suffer for the bad, but I have to err on the side of caution. But there are a lot of things that we do, that we were doing in a manual process that we've actually converted to a automated process.
So, John, we've talked a lot about property fraud, and I know that there's probably millions of property owners that are on the tax roll for the assessor collector. How do you collaborate with your assessor collector to combat this issue, or at least help educate the constituents?
One of the things that I do with John Ames, he's our tax assessor collector. He sends out tax notices every year to the tune of maybe over 1 million property owners.
And that's a hard mailing that goes in the mail.
It's a hard mailing that goes out in the mail. And so I collaborated with Mr. Ames, and we did an insert on my property fraud alert system that he would insert inside of his tax notice. That's an awareness that, hey, while your tax statement comes from the county tax assessor, we also have an insert from the county clerk that you can also subscribe to a property fraud alert system.
Of those 1 million mailings, how many people have registered for the fraud alert?
Sadly, Chris, John Ames sent out over 1 million tax notices, and with the county clerk's property fraud alert system. As of earlier this year, we only had over 14,000 subscribers. And we're talking about something that's free to the public, but something that everybody should be concerned about. And I've been trying to figure out what it is.
So we're talking less than 2%.
Less than 2%. And I have no idea how to get people to pay attention to things that come in the mail. I don't know. I've actually had a few people call to ask if that was legitimate.
Wow.
And I said yes. And so one of the things it may be based on the recon that I've gotten, where we actually change, just say, property fraud, go to the county clerk's website on Dallas County's website so that you can see that it's legitimate, and then register that way. But I'm not quite sure how to address that, because we've been doing that. Our collaboration with the tax assessor has been going on for 3 years, and still it may have increased by maybe 2,000, but I was anticipating that we would have at least 800,000 subscribers by now. But
it would be curious to see if there was a prompt for every recording when it comes to real property that you almost have to navigate and click through a registration process. Wouldn't that be great, where you almost force people to register?
That would be great. I've even talked to I've had conversations with Texas Land and Title and the title industry.
Yeah, you'd think that the title industry would wholeheartily embrace this.
Yeah, and we've actually talked about them actually doing registering people when they close on their new homes.
It should be It should be mandatory within your closing that you register for the alerts.
You're right.
Or at least every other constituent touch point that you have in your office. So if someone comes in for a birth certificate, they get a flyer. If someone comes in for a marriage license, they get a flyer.
And we actually
if you can do that.
Well, but we actually have a QR code whether it's in my vital records for birth, marriage, and death. We have a QR code for property fraud.
Right there.
On my recording division for my deed records, we have the same QR code for property fraud. And it could be that you've given me an idea, possibly when we issue a marriage license, add the alert inside of the packet that we give them.
Absolutely.
See, collaboration works.
Yeah. Or just on every piece of mail that you send out, that QR code just printed on the envelope, or it's just somewhere.
Yeah.
Because if we think about it, most individuals, that's their most important financial asset, is their home, is their real property. If there's something out there that's free that can protect it, God, we got to get people to register.
But also, and it's also generational wealth, because a lot of that occurs when it occurs on property that people buy, that they're actually living in. But a lot of it occur on property, on inherited property, or property that mom and dad may have left, or grandma and grandpa may have left. And so it actually negatively impacts, that property fraud actually negatively impacts that generational wealth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some, we'll have to sit down and maybe do another episode and focus on that. Maybe get your assessor collector in here, Mr. Ames.
John Ames, my good friend John Ames,
Yeah.
would be happy. He loves talking about his role in local government as it relates to the tax assessor collector.
Yeah.
The tax assessor.
Because I noticed in your background too, you spent some time on the appraisal district,
Yes.
which a lot of people don't understand that that's not really a part of county government or local government. Like it is, but it isn't. It's like a quasi agency.
Mm-hmm.
So to unpack that a little bit more would be an interesting topic.
Okay. Well, actually, if I can, the appraisal district is an independent body. It's not governed by the county. It's not governed by the state. It's an independent body that does an evaluation of property. That is it. The appraisal district will do an evaluation of the property to say the value of the property is based on comps for other properties surrounding your particular property. The commissioners will set the tax rate. There's actually a cap on what you can what you can levy as it relates to a tax. Based on the evaluation from the appraisal district, that information goes to the tax assessor based on every piece of property at that. And if there are 1.7 million pieces of property in Dallas County, the appraisal district will do an assessment. It may be the same, that where they made no change. And so that information goes to the tax assessor. The tax assessor will, if the appraisal district says your property is worth $450,000, the tax assessor will take that $450,000, apply the tax rate that Dallas County Commissioners Court will set. That will be the taxes that you are owed. That's the tax notice statement that goes out, that the tax assessor sends out, and that's the money that you owe the county. And so it's not 100% the responsibility of the Commissioners Court. It's not 100% the responsibility of the tax assessor. It's not 100% the responsibility of the appraisal district. It's a collaboration between the two. They have different functions.
Interesting.
Yes.
Well, thank you for demystifying that. I'm sure some people will still be massively confused.
But I will say, when you want to know what's the value of someone's property, the true value of the property is what someone is willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things about the increase of property taxes in Dallas, the evaluations, is because you have people moving from California and other states. Well, Texas doesn't have a state income tax. In the 2020 census, the 2020 census, there were 5 million people that moved to Texas.
Wow.
5 million. At least 2 were in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. 2 million were in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And so when you have someone, and I'll use a family member that moved from California to Louisiana, and he sold his very small house in California for $750,000. He bought
a whole subdivision in Louisiana.
He bought a house, a 3,600 square foot house on 2.5 acres of land for $375,000. And so when you have people coming in who selling from other states who selling their property for a greater value, and just imagine, Chris, you live in California, you have a 1,100 square foot house. You sell it for a mint, $700,000. You can move to Texas and buy a house, a 3,000 square foot house, for $450,000.
Yeah.
And you see a house that you want, and so then you get into a bidding war. Someone here is local. I'm local. I want to buy the house, but I'm limited on funds. You're coming from California. You're unlimited on funds. So now it becomes a bidding war.
Yeah. And it's interesting how that boils down into the tax rate,
Yes.
the general fund,
Mm-hmm.
and everything else that's associated with it.
Yes.
So, well, John, I think we're going to wrap it up there.
Okay.
It's been great to hear what you've done in office, what you want to do in office, the technology you've adopted, where your vision and your leadership has taken Dallas County, and hopefully some of the constituents listening will understand a little bit more about you, about the role. And hopefully if they're listening, they'll go to your website and they will register their...
For the property fraud
Yes.
alert. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, again,
I would love to come back for a part 2 and a part 3.
yes,
So.
we'll definitely have you on. There's a lot to talk about.
Yes.
Thanks again for coming in.
Chris, I'm glad you had me. This was an absolute joy and a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Yeah. Mic check. It's co-file Chris with the clarity, breaking down the system like a tech barbarity. Civic Hub's live surfing knowledge like a tsunami, rolling through the info smooth Maserati. Civic vibes, we innovate and elevate. Local government shift, let's recalibrate. Tech meets transparency, the gap we abbreviate. Civic Hub anthem, come participate. Street lights buzzing, city halls we navigate. Machines in the council throwing out the candidate. Blockchain buzzing, Chris gonna moderate. Algorithm steering votes, lines automate. Plug in, gather round his pod like it's holy. Future blueprint drafted digitally solely. Ideas hatch quick, think it's gotta be Goldie. The Civic Hub thrives where the minds all moldy. Policy precision sharper than a switchblade. Red tape slayer, break it open with the upgrade. AI council, tech dreams don't cascade. We building the future bricks cut from the data spade.